Hi everyone, welcome to another lecture in this self-knowledge course. Today we will study Lecture 18 of Phase B, titled Theosophy, Spiritism, and Medium. The purpose of this lecture is to understand these schools, recognize why they do not lead to the self-realization of the being, and see the direction in which they guide their followers. By understanding this, we can avoid confusing or mixing their teachings with this knowledge. Let's begin by examining Theosophy. What is Theosophy? The word Theosophy comes from the Greek words theos, meaning God, and sophia, meaning wisdom. For this reason, the term Theosophy means the wisdom of God. The Theosophical school emerged in Russia during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, an initiate whose mission was to prevent the spread of the dialectical materialism promoted by Karl Marx and Lenin from destroying the spiritual principles of that region of the world. For this reason, the Theosophical movement sought to oppose skepticism, since dialectical materialism aimed to lead humanity toward complete atheism through materialistic reasoning and intellectualism, persuading people that God or the spiritual dimension did not exist. The objective of the Theosophical school, therefore, was to demonstrate through scientific approaches that the soul truly exists. To accomplish this, the school devoted itself to the study and practice of parapsychology, the different powers of the mind, psychic phenomena, astral projection, hypnotism, and telepathy. It also investigated the materialization of apparitions, mysterious voices, post-mortem manifestations, the awakening of latent human faculties, and many other related phenomena. However, when we carefully examine this doctrine, we find that its purpose is not the self-realization of the being, because it does not teach the three factors for the revolution of consciousness. It does not explain how to eliminate the psychological defects in which our consciousness remains trapped and conditioned. Neither does it teach the necessity of attaining chastity or creating the existential bodies of the being through suprasex. Although the Theosophical school spread throughout the world through the sacrificial efforts of its students, its teachings do not emphasize the third factor as the means of helping others attain self-realization. The school promotes vegetarianism and teaches that mechanical evolution will eventually lead humanity to enlightenment. However, it does not teach the reality of involution or the need for an inner revolution in order to achieve true liberation. As we have seen, its principal mission was to preserve spiritual hope and keep interest in higher realities alive, preventing humanity from falling into complete materialism. Now let us examine Spiritism. What is Spiritism? Spiritism, also known as spiritualism, is a system of beliefs and religious practices based on the supposed communication with the spirits of the deceased, usually through mediums. This doctrine was developed during the second half of the 19th century, with figures such as Allan Kardec playing an important role in its development. Spiritism teaches methods intended to establish communication with the souls of the dead, or with what it calls the spirits of the disembodied. However, what spiritualists call spirit is not the true being of the deceased, but rather a psychological I or a legion of psychological defects belonging to that disembodied person. At other times, the entities that appear during these sessions come from the infradimensions. These are demons that impersonate saints, enlightened masters, and other elevated beings in order to grant favors to those attending the seances, while at the same time establishing energetic links that allow them to continually drain their energy. Through these entities, or through the psychological defects of the disembodied person who manifests during the seance, people may receive information, illnesses may appear to be healed, material difficulties may be resolved, and other similar phenomena may occur. During a seance, several people gather around a table, hold hands, and together invoke the presence of a particular spirit. They generally ask the spirit to demonstrate its presence through movements, sounds, or other physical manifestations. Tables, as well as devices such as the Ouija board, are commonly used for these practices. Eventually, the disembodied entity takes possession of one of the participants, who temporarily lends their physical body for the manifestation. This individual is known as a medium because they serve as the intermediary between the disembodied entity and the physical world. Once the spirit takes control of the medium's body, it begins speaking, often using the same voice it had while alive. Those attending the séance then ask various questions, and the disembodied entity answers them one by one. One of the greatest dangers of these practices is that many participants gradually become dependent on them. They grow accustomed to seeking answers for all their physical and spiritual concerns through these séances, instead of learning to seek guidance from their own inner being. At the same time, they establish connections with negative entities. Because these practices often seem to provide temporary solutions to their problems, many participants begin recommending them to others, causing more and more people to become dependent on the same practices. Most of these individuals sincerely believe they have communicated with a saint, an enlightened being, or even a god. They never suspect that the communicating presence may actually be a demon or the psyche, or legion of psychological defects, of a disembodied person that no longer possesses a physical vehicle through which to express itself. In many spiritual healing sessions, even surgical procedures are claimed to be performed, and numerous people experience recoveries, which further strengthens their dependence on these practices. As a result, schools of Spiritism expanded enormously during the last century, attracting millions of believers and followers. As we can clearly see, these practices are not directed toward the self-realization of the being. They do not teach the elimination of psychological defects, nor do they provide the knowledge necessary to attain scientific chastity or any of the essential principles required for genuine spiritual development. As the Master Jesus taught, "By their fruits you shall know them." If we observe the kinds of practices commonly carried out within Spiritism, we find activities such as divination, fortune-telling, advice obtained from spirits, love spells, separation rituals, prayers, ceremonial rituals, Ouija board practices, candle rituals, domination, the infliction of illnesses, healings, and similar works, all of which are considered forms of black magic. Let's see now. What is the medium? A medium is a passive and receptive individual who allows metaphysical entities from beyond the grave to use their physical body and motor center as a vehicle for manifestation. In other words, the medium is the person through whom an entity expresses itself during a séance. In order for the entity to enter the medium's body, the medium turns his astral body forward, so that the entity can enter through the motor center. These individuals possess a high degree of sensitivity that enables them to perceive parallel planes of existence and communicate with entities that inhabit these lower dimensions. Many mediums sincerely believe that they are helping others through what they consider to be a special gift. Likewise, many are convinced that they are offering their bodies so that superior beings may manifest themselves through them. However, it is important to understand that for the White Lodge, in the superior worlds, each human body, whether male or female, is qualified as the living temple of a master or a divine spark. This temple is deeply respected by all the higher hierarchies. For this reason, no master of the White Lodge ever expresses themselves through another person's physical vehicle. A superior being would never manifest through someone else's body. When a master needs to manifest or needs to come to this three-dimensional world, he first sends his person or physical body to prepare, and later he can manifest through his own vehicles. But he comes to his own house, not someone else's house. Lending one's body for mediumship creates very serious karmic consequences. Among the karmas most commonly associated with mediumship are epilepsy and madness. All epileptics were mediums in their previous lives, and even after death the medium continues to be possessed by demons. Since at first he gives his body at will, however, later the entities continue to possess his body without his consent, and after a certain time, the person ends up completely distancing himself from his own divine being. They then enter the submerged involution of the infernal worlds. Every person who has karma of mediumship will have to disintegrate those works, working those selves or psychic elements of mediumship, and paying the karma with sacrifice for humanity. As we have seen, although these schools may appear attractive because they seem to offer solutions to many of life's problems, they do not lead us toward the true purpose of our existence, which is to become one with our own inner being. For this reason, we are invited to study our theosophical eyes, those parts of ourselves that believe the awakening of consciousness consists of experiencing paranormal phenomena or developing psychic powers. These defects divert our attention from what is truly essential: to die psychologically, to be born spiritually, and to sacrifice for humanity. We must also work to eliminate our spiritualist eyes, those that constantly seek answers and solutions from external sources instead of searching for them within through our own being. Likewise, if we have participated in Spiritist practices, we should observe and eliminate the psychological elements that led us to become involved in those activities. Finally, we must also observe our mediumistic eyes, those that seek to create dependence in others by interpreting their astral experiences or claiming to bring them messages from the internal worlds. Each of us has our own inner being, who is our true guide and master, and it is to him that we must learn to listen and follow. This concludes today's explanation of this interesting subject. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. In the next lecture, we will explore another fascinating topic. We will study the figure who has been known throughout history as Lucifer, the devil, and Satan, in order to understand the reality behind these names. Until next time.